It's that time of the summer where peaches are in season, and that inspired me to share with you my peach crumble pie recipe. And a great pie is only as good as the fruit inside, and the peaches for this pie are provided to me by Recovery, which is a farmer's market in a shipping container located at Odell Brewing. So if you're looking for locally sourced ingredients and goods, go check them out. And if you're new to the channel, this is Recipes with Ben, so let's make a pie. Now this recipe is broken down into 3 parts, and that includes the peach filling, the pie crust, and the crumble topping. The topping and the pie crust can be made ahead of time if needed, but since the peaches are the star of the show, let's start with the filling first. Now since the peaches are super fresh, they're super easy to slice up, and that starts out by using a knife to follow around the pit of the peach, then simply give the peach a twist to get into 2 halves, and they should come apart pretty easily if they're very ripe. Then pop out the pit and begin slicing the peach into about 8 slices per peach. Now, I won't bore you with cutting up all the peaches, so with a snap of my finger, there's all the peaches cut up, and I used 7 total peaches for this recipe. To this fruit, I'm adding a half a cup of brown sugar, followed by a teaspoon of cinnamon, and a half a teaspoon of nutmeg. Then give the fruit a quick toss to coat them, and it's time for the last addition, which is the juice of a freshly squeezed lemon, which in my experience is always about 1.5 ounces of fresh squeezed lemon juice. Pour the juice over the top and mix to incorporate, and let the peaches sit in the sugar mixture for about 30 minutes to allow them to macerate. This is going to pull out some of the juices from inside the peaches, because if you were to bake them right away right now, too much liquid would leak out of the peaches and cause a soggy crust even after baking. 30 minutes later, this is what the peaches look like, but the real difference is the brown sugary liquid at the bottom of the bowl. So to keep the flavor but lose some of the liquid, I'm going to pour the peaches over a strainer into a pot and set the peaches aside for a second. Then place the pot on top of medium heat and begin heating until the liquid starts to simmer. The idea now is to evaporate about half the water to make it like a syrup with almost a caramel-like consistency. Then add it back to the peaches once it's done, along with a couple spoonfuls of flour and a teaspoon of cornstarch. The amount of flour really depends on your peaches, but you just want to coat them in flour to absorb any extra liquid and thicken the interior once they're cooked. Then toss them together and adjust the flour if needed, and you can move on to making the crust, which again, as I said before, can be made the day ahead of time if you're running low on time right now. Now, I've made this crust before on the channel for my mini service berry pies, but the recipe is as follows. In a food processor, I'm adding 150 grams of all-purpose flour, 50 grams of sugar, and pulse to combine those 2 dry ingredients. Then I add 1 stick of salted butter in half tablespoon increments and pulse after each addition until it starts to become crumbly. Then I'm going to add 8 tablespoons of ice water, 2 tablespoons at a time, and pulse in between each addition until the dough starts to come together, and the resulting dough should be something pliable like Play-Doh. Then pour the dough into a bowl that has a lid and press it into a disc and cover it with said lid and allow it to sit in the fridge for at least 30 minutes or overnight if you're making this day before, to let the butter re-solidify. After 30 minutes, flour a work surface to place the dough onto it and then roll the dough into a circle with a rolling pin until it's about the same size as your pie dish. And it should be about 1/8 of an inch thick. For full transparency, it's very hot in my house right now, making this dough start to melt on me a little bit when I start working with it. And so in an ideal world, what would happen is you'd remove from the surface, fold it in half and fold it in half again, then unfold it inside the pie pan after transferring it. Then I'm going to fill in any missing pieces of the dough until the whole pan is completely covered with the pie crust. Now to make sure this dough is completely right and the butter is not melted, I'm going to place it in the freezer for about 10 minutes so the butter can reset and allow the dough to solidify and look something like this after that time. Okay, now for the last item, which is the crumble topping. And the basic ratio is 1 cup flour to 1 cup sugar to 1 stick of butter. And that's too much for this size pie, so based on my experience of what I had left over, you need about 1/3 cup of flour, 1/3 cup of sugar, and 1/3 stick of butter. Add them all to a food processor and pulse until it becomes a sandy consistency. I place this in the fridge until it's ready to assemble into a pie, and this too can be made ahead of time if you want. Now aside from the assembly, which starts with the pie dough that just came out of the freezer in that pie dish. Now spoon the peaches to fill the entire pie crust, but in my experience, there still was a little bit of peach juice that leaked out at the bottom of the bowl, but you don't want to add that to the pie right now. So instead what I did was reserve that to drizzle it over the ice cream at the very end. This means there's no waste, but by not adding extra liquid to the pie, it prevents that dreaded soggy bottom that would make Paul Hollywood cry. Then spoon the crumble mixture over the top of the pie until all the tiny crevices are filled in, and in my case it did have a little bit left over as I mentioned. Then bake this pie in a preheated oven that was set to 375 degrees Fahrenheit for at least an hour. And if it's not done at that time, you can give it up to about 10 more minutes. depending on how your oven cooks. And here's the results of making a peach pie 100% from scratch. And I know it's tempting to eat this pie right now, and trust me, I understand. My house smells completely amazing with the fresh scent of pie. But you want to let it rest and cool completely, then everything will start to come together in perfect harmony. And then it's time to cut into that pie. So I'm trying carefully to get the perfect slice for this video. So I cut with a knife to make a wedge, and then along the back of the pie crust. And I know at this point, a pie server would be extremely helpful, but all I own is a spatula. But with the right amount of confidence and careful cutting, here's that slice. It's perfection on a plate. Crust is cooked perfectly and evenly, and cooked without a soggy bottom. Peaches are set and the topping is completely crisp and almost crackly-like. Now I like to serve this with a fresh scoop of vanilla ice cream, and now it's time for me to enjoy this fresh made pie. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope this inspires you to make homemade pies completely from scratch. And a huge thank you to Recovery for providing these fresh peaches for this pie. And if you like this type of content, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.